It started with a whisper. At first, Emily thought it was just the wind curling through the abandoned well behind her grandmother's house. But then, on the third night of her visit, she heard it clearly. A child sobbing, drifting up from the depths. She froze. The sound was faint, barely more than a breath, but unmistakable. It clawed at something deep inside her, an instinctual fear that whispered, "Something is wrong." Her grandmother had warned her, "Don't go near that well, child," she had said with eyes clouded by years of silence. "It remembers." Emily had laughed it off, convinced it was just another superstition like the rest of the old woman's mutterings. But now, standing by the window in the suffocating dark, she felt a different kind of certainty. The well was watching her. The next morning, she asked her grandmother about it again. This time, the old woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "A girl went missing long ago. They searched for days, weeks. Then, one evening, they heard crying coming from the well. But when they looked, it was empty." Emily shivered. "What happened?" Her grandmother's gaze turned distant. "They say the crying never stopped." That night, Emily lay awake, listening. The house was still, the air thick with something heavy, something unseen. Then at 2:17 a.m., the sobbing began again. This time it was closer. She sat up, heart pounding, pulse thrumming against her ribs. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the hallway. She swallowed hard, her breath shallow. The wooden floorboards groaned. Step by step. And then, nothing. Silence, vast and smothering. She clenched her fists, willing herself to move, to do something. But before she could, there was a whisper, barely a breath against her ear. "Help me!" Her scream died in her throat as her bedroom door creaked open. The door swung open with agonizing slowness. The hallway beyond was nothing but a gaping void, an abyss of shadow stretching into the unknown. Emily's body refused to move. Every nerve in her being screamed at her to run, to bury herself under the covers like a child. But something else, something cold and magnetic, urged her forward. "Help me!" The whisper had been so close, too close. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was inside the room. She turned, the air thick and heavy, pressing against her lungs like invisible hands. The window was shut. The air was still, but she knew she wasn't alone. The closet door was ajar, a single gaping inch. The darkness inside yawned back at her, stretching impossibly deep. She could feel it staring at her, waiting. Emily's throat went dry. Then, before she could process what she was doing, her feet moved. A step forward. Another. Her breath shallow, pulse hammering in her ears. The moment her fingertips brushed the wood. Bang! The door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the walls. Emily stumbled back, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. The whispering returned, slithering through the air like a breeze that carried no wind. "You left me." The voice was different now, older, angry. The closet door didn't move, but from beneath it, something slid into the dim moonlight. A single dirt-stained handprint, small, like a child's. Emily's stomach twisted. The smell of damp earth filled her nose, cloying and thick. Then the crying began again, louder this time, and it wasn't coming from the well anymore. It was coming from inside the house. The floorboards groaned outside her door. A shadow shifted beneath the crack. Not walking, crawling. And then, silence. A single knock, gentle, almost hesitant. Then another. Knock, knock, knock. 3 soft taps, slow and deliberate. Emily couldn't breathe. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice. "Let me in." Emily clutched the blankets, her fingers digging into the fabric so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Let me in." The voice was neither childlike nor adult. It was something in between, something fractured, something wrong. The door handle rattled. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears, her breaths coming in short, uneven gasps. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Then, the crying started again. But this time it was layered. One voice, then two, then three. More. A chorus of sobs echoing through the room, filling the air with a grief so thick she felt it settle in her bones. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block it out. But the sound wasn't just in the room anymore. It was inside her. You left me. Why did you leave me? Why did you let me die? A memory slammed into her like a brick wall. A flash of a little girl, dark hair clinging to her face, dirt streaked across her cheeks. No, that wasn't possible. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. The crying, the knocking, the whispers. This had to be a dream. Then the door burst open. A blast of cold air surged through the room, the force knocking Emily back. Her head slammed against the headboard, pain exploding behind her eyes. Dizzy, disoriented, she looked up, and she was there. The girl from the well, or what was left of her. Her skin was gray, stretched too tight over sharp, angular bones. Mud caked her hair, dripping down her face in sluggish streaks. Her eyes, God, they were hollow. Not empty, not blank, but hollow, as if something had been scraped out from the inside. Her mouth opened. A sound came out, not a scream, not a cry. Something worse. A gurgling, choking rasp, like water filling lungs, like earth pressing against a throat. Emily tried to move, tried to scream, but her body betrayed her. Then the girl lunged. The room exploded in black. And for a moment, just a moment, Emily wasn't in her bed anymore. She was in the well, and someone was burying her alive. Darkness swallowed her. Cold, suffocating, endless. The weight of damp earth pressed against her chest, filling her mouth, her lungs. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped. Only silence, thick and consuming. Then a whisper. You remember now, don't you? Emily gasped, her vision snapping back into focus. No longer in her bedroom, no longer safe. She was inside the well. Her hands clawed at the slick, moss-covered stones, fingers scraping against the dampness. She could hear the steady drip, drip, drip of water echoing in the cavernous space. But she wasn't alone. Something shifted behind her, slow, deliberate, a presence just beyond the edge of her vision. She turned. A face emerged from the darkness, inches from her own. The girl. No, the thing pretending to be the girl. Its lips parted, but the voice came from everywhere at once. You left me here. A memory surged forward, brutal and undeniable. Years ago, a summer afternoon, the old well behind the house, and a little girl. Dark hair, bright eyes. Her sister. No, that was wrong. Emily had no sister. Had she? The past blurred, like ink bleeding through wet paper. You promised to come back. The girl's face twisted, her hollow eyes filling with something else. Not sadness, not anger, hunger. Emily thrashed, her hands finding purchase against the damp stone. If she could just climb, just pull herself out. The girl's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around Emily's wrist. Too cold, too strong. Emily's breath hitched. Her skin burned where the girl touched her. A searing, biting pain that burrowed deep, deeper. Stay! Emily screamed. Then, the world lurched. She was falling, falling. And then she hit the floor of her bedroom, gasping for air. The well was gone. The darkness was gone, but the whisper remained. You can't escape me. The closet door was open again. And this time, she could see something moving inside. Emily's body convulsed with shivers, her skin still tingling with the phantom grip of that thing. The girl, or whatever she had become. Her breaths were shallow, ragged, her mind screaming at her to run, but she couldn't. Her gaze was locked on the closet. It stood wide open now, the darkness inside shifting, undulating, like something alive. The air around it was wrong, thick and heavy, pressing against her like a tide trying to pull her under. And then, the sobbing began again. Not from inside the closet, not from the hallway, from inside her own head. You left me. You let me die. Flashes of memory slammed into her like a tidal wave. A summer day, laughter, a game of hide and seek, her little sister's face peering up from inside the well. Emily leaning over the edge, whispering, "Stay there, I'll be right back." Running inside, forgetting, distracted by something trivial. A call from a friend, the lure of a cold drink on a hot day. And then silence until night fell, until the search began, until the moment they found the well. Empty. Cold dread twisted inside Emily's gut. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't some ghost story. This was her fault. You promised. The sobbing turned to something else. A wet, gurgling laugh. Emily's body moved on instinct, scrambling backward, but the darkness in the closet pulsed. Something stepped out. Not a girl, not even human anymore. The figure was hunched, its limbs wrong, too long, too thin, bent in ways that defied nature. The smell of damp earth clung to it, seeping into the walls, the floor, her lungs. Its head snapped up, hollow sockets locking onto hers. Then it smiled. A grin too wide, too sharp, stretching impossibly across its face. And then it spoke. "I'm back," Emily screamed. The thing lunged. Darkness swallowed her. And for a moment, just a moment, she wasn't in her room anymore. She was in the well again, and the dirt was already falling. The darkness was thick, suffocating. Emily thrashed, her fingers clawing at the unseen walls pressing against her. The weight of the earth was above her, around her, inside her. She wasn't just in the well. She was being buried alive. The soil filled her mouth, her lungs, seeping into the cracks of her mind. And through it all, that voice whispered, low, broken, soaked in something ancient. "Now you know how it feels." Emily's screams were swallowed by the dirt. Every breath she took was thick with decay, every heartbeat a countdown to the inevitable. No one was coming for her, just like no one had come for her. But then, a flicker of something, a thought, a memory, not of the girl, of herself. She had left her sister. That was true, but not on purpose. She had forgotten. The realization struck like lightning, sharp and blinding. Guilt had filled the spaces where memory had failed. But the truth was different. She had never meant to leave her. She had been a child. And this thing, this hollowed-out thing, wasn't her sister anymore. Emily's eyes snapped open. She wasn't in the well. She was in her room. The closet loomed open before her, its darkness writhing like a living thing. And standing in its threshold was the thing, the twisted, skeletal shadow of what had once been her sister. It tilted its head, waiting, expecting fear. But something had shifted. Emily's hands curled into fists. Her breath steadied. No, her voice was hoarse, but firm. "You're not real." The thing hesitated. "You're not my sister." The shadows around it flickered, wavering like mist under a rising sun. The grin faltered, the hollow eyes narrowing. Emily took a step forward. "You're just a story," she whispered. "A nightmare made from guilt. But I remember now. I remember the truth." The air cracked like glass. The walls shuddered, and the thing screamed. Not the sound of a ghost, not even the sound of something alive. It was the sound of something unmade. The darkness collapsed in on itself, the air turning sharp and cold. And then, silence. The closet was empty. The house was still. Emily collapsed onto her bed, her body shaking. She didn't sleep that night, but by morning the well outside was gone, as if it had never been there at all.